Greetings, everyone. Welcome. My name's Judd Hendricks. I'm the Executive Director of Interfaith Paths to Peace, and I want to welcome you to our Tuesday afternoon, 12 o'clock Soul-Centric City program. This is a program we do every Tuesday at noon. We are looking at what does it mean for us to be a soul-centric city? And we're starting this month with different life stages. So each month we'll take a different life stage and ask the question, does Louisville have what it needs in order to create a soul-centric path for all of our Louisvillians? And so one of the things that we're doing the first year of this program is to uplift what is already happening in our city to create a soul-centric city. And by that, we mean, what do we have everything that everyone needs in order to go through human development, deeply grounded in their soul, a sense of being whole, and a chance to thrive. So thank you for joining us today. You're welcome to add comments if you're joining us on Facebook. On the Zoom, you're welcome to put the comments in the comment chat box. If you're joining us on Facebook Live, you're also welcome to put questions or comments into the chat box, and we'll bring those into the conversation. We have a really exciting panel, some really fascinating people. We've started with the birth. We've been talking with birth doulas and midwives, and talking about what does it mean to create a thriving, for Louisville to be a nest, essentially, to welcome, to name and claim children. Today's conversation is on naming and claiming rituals from different interfaith and different cultural traditions. And we have 5 panelists that are going to join us to share different ways in which their tradition names and claims children. One of the hopes for the soul-centric city is that every child that's born in our city would know that they belong to us, that they would be claimed by us, so that that every child can grow up knowing that Louisville is a place where they are welcomed, where they belong, and where we're all committed to their health and wholeness. One of my hopes is, as we go through these different life stages, is that we're going to look at rituals, the importance of ritual to cultivate the soul. And so we're going to be looking at different rituals, starting with birthing rituals, but we'll also be looking at rites of passages, different ways in which our cultures and religions do that. We'll also going to follow that through all of the different life stages from now until December. So I hope you'll join us on Thursdays. These programs are recorded, and they'll be up on Interfaith Paths to Peace page as well. So without further ado, what I'd like to do, we have 5 panelists that are going to share their tradition and how their tradition names and claims children. There's a fascinating rituals and ceremonies that we have that go with different cultures. And what I want us to listen for, if you're participating, are what are the threads that connect these different practices? And I'm also wondering what practices we may need to create if people don't belong to these religious traditions. So what is kind of a post-religious rituals of naming and claiming that we might want to create for all of our children being born and living in Louisville. So I'm going to briefly call on our panelists to, they will introduce themselves and share a little bit more about the rituals and ceremonies. Then we'll have open time for just conversation. So thank you all so much for being on. The first guest and panelist we have is Karina Bareilles. Karina, many of you all probably know, she works with La Casita, but has been such a leader and in many ways a priestess. I think that's a word I would use for you, Karina, a priestess, to invite people into a deep spirituality from the Latinx tradition. So Karina, thank you again for being on, and would love for you to unmute yourself and share about rituals and ceremonies out of your tradition.
Thank you, Judd, and buenos dias. Good morning, good afternoon. I don't even know what time it is. I'm lost with the time change, but so very excited and humbled to be among all of you. Um, when you asked me to share about traditions and share about how we claim the children, it really hit a very profound wound within myself, because my people, we're still supporting, we're still enduring and coping with 530 years of colonization. So my ancestors were colonized, their ancient religions were are still under their surveillance and the hate of the colonizer. So it's a combination of so many things, from the indigenous side of my family, the one that is not spoken in my family, because we come from communities just like in the US that we are very racist. And again, as I was saying, the consequences of the colonization are still on our shoulders. That part of the traditions are traditions that I've learned here in Louisville with my indigenous sisters, because that wasn't given to me. Um, so what I've heard and what I've learned from them, it's something absolutely, um, in a way, very sad in how some of the women see themselves when they are pregnant as a burden to their community. They have to continue working in the fields. And one of our dearest midwives that survived the war in Guatemala, that had to flee to the mountains, she said that when it was time for the babies to be born, women will just squat, push, and take the baby out, kiss the baby, put the baby in the bag, and then continue walking. So there was no time for claiming or reclaiming. It was only time for survival. And I hear a lot of stories of like, okay, so we just give thanks and then we move on. Whatever name that we can think of, we bless the baby. A lot of families, unfortunately, it takes them a long time to go and register the baby, because the city or the nearest town is very, very far away from where they live. But for people, for me, like I'm a mestiza, the tradition that I learned in my family is absolutely very Catholic and very conservative. So the idea of reclaiming and naming me was under the Catholic Church. I was baptized, and in regular tradition, and what I learned within my family is that blessing the baby with baptism will take you away from sin, the original sin. So that was the main idea, and that's how I grew up. That was the indoctrination that I grew up with. And I say this with a lot of respect, but that's my perception. When I arrived to Louisville and I started learning, and that was 28 years ago, and I started learning about other traditions and other way of looking at life and looking at how we welcome life. I had the personal opportunity. The father of my children, he is Muslim, and so what we decided when Ali and Fatima were born was that we were going to teach them about love. So for us, it was absolutely very important to talk about a divine being that was welcoming them to this world. So the our approach was from his side. He was always celebrating different rituals that they do in his family, like naming the child with a first name and the middle name representing who the father is, then the third name, who the grandfather is, and then so on and so forth. So they will see, who came before them. But on my side, when I think my daughter was 1 year old and my son was almost 3, we decided to baptize them in a way, and I'm so very blessed to be surrounded by priests that believe in liberation theology and believe in a different way of Catholicism, where the celebration of the baptism was nothing, that it didn't have anything to do with original sin. It had to do with welcoming them to a life surrounded by love and by blessings and by everybody in their community that loved them. So it was absolutely really wonderful to see, in a Catholic temple, how people from different cultures, beliefs, or ways of life, we came together to bless my babies. Something very beautiful that has given me is that, in the different contexts where I have raised my children, I've had the opportunity to teach them about love and justice. And I remember one time that my daughter Fatima, who is the one that gets this very wise and very wise ways to look at life, she told me, from now on, I'm not gonna call Jesus, I'm gonna call Jesus Justice. And she was very little when she decided to do that. So when we were in the Middle East, we lived there for 3 years. One day, I opened my wallet and there was a picture of Jesus. And I said, Fatima, do you know who this is? And she's like, no. And I said, Fatima, this is Justice. And she's like, no, this cannot be. I thought that Justice was a woman, was a girl. This is not possible. So, for me, when she said that, it was absolutely really beautiful, because I thought, I am so glad that my children are learning that this divine being that loves them and takes care of them, and that blesses our family, doesn't have a gender. It could be different genders. So that's my little story, how I moved from what was taken away from my ancestors, what we were forced into, and then what I had the blessing to decide within my Louisville family, I had to welcome my children.
Karina, thank you so much. That I actually did want to start with you for those exact reasons. With this panel, I intentionally did not invite in, I don't have a Jewish representative, I don't have a Muslim representative, I don't have a Protestant Christian representative, because those are really the paradigms that I think we know the most about, those naming and claiming rituals. And I'm not trying to say that those aren't important, but what was really important for this panel is to uplift the ways in which maybe marginalized communities, or communities that and I appreciate you naming the challenge of the rituals that come maybe with the colonizer's religion, and how do you honor the beauties of those pieces without pulling in anyway, in the ritual tradition, you do such a beautiful job of honoring all of that and then making that personal. So Karina, I want to talk about that some more, but thank you so much for that. And Chief Makula, if you wouldn't mind going next. Again, I wanted to honor the Native American indigenous traditions that Louisville, which is the original soul place of Louisville, this place that we stand and call home. And so would you introduce yourself a little bit more, Chief Makula, and share about the rituals and traditions in your tradition?
Yes, it gives me great honor to be part of this circle of life today, and thank you. And I share a few words today and about the things that I've witnessed and I've seen with different, Western Native American culture when it comes to raising children. And first of all, when a child is born, different traditions have it that they don't give it a name for 1 year. They want to make sure it's going to be healthy. They want to make sure everything, and they study the child and that. So I had a friend of mine, they had a child, and the nurses kept wanting to know, what are you going to name it? We're not giving a name, it's their tradition. And they harassed him, sort of, Finally, they come up with, we got a name, it's Hoke Sheila. Okay, and they was happy, and they wrote it down, certificate. What does Hoke Sheila say? Boy, just a boy. And that's the way it is, different things, and we try to keep the mothers very safe. Sometimes they wipe them down, what we call wipe them down with a eagle feathers, some sage. They take away the negativism, try to keep the mother in a way where they try to keep away from negativism and many things like that. And 1 year later, it can go more than a year, it can go up in different, numbers, but 1 year later they have a feast for the young child, and often a giveaway. And during that time, it gives the parents and grandparents time to study the child with an Indian name. Sometimes it's performed by a medicine man, medicine person. Often it's just, the relatives that get together and they choose a name and they announce it to the spirit world where the spirit people know that child's Indian name. And they do different tobacco offerings and many things and have a blessing ceremony all the time and a feast. And the child is acknowledged with its new name. And that's one of the traditions that we have. And often I've heard an elder say one time that when a baby was first born, if you look real careful, you might see a little blue light from the sky or the ceiling come down. And it comes right into that soft spot of its mind, of the head, where it's still soft. And another part of it will go into the heart. It's like, and the third part of the soul goes into the stomach area. Your gut, you might say, there's another word for it, And the fourth part becomes like the bubble around you, the aura around you. And that's some of the four parts of a human soul. And so when a child is born, I know traditions change over generations, but the way I've seen it done, they take the umbilical cord of the child and they'll make a medicine bag. A young boy, a baby boy, they will sometimes make a medicine bag in the shape of a salamander, like a lizard, but a salamander. Put that in there. But it's a young baby girl, they'll make a medicine bag in the shape of a turtle for Turtle Island. And they may put a few more things in that, but they always are attached to the umbilical cord of life. And in the older way, they would take some of what they call the afterbirth, and they would take it outside the village and have a prayer, give it to the elements. And at that time, that child always knows how to get home. They always have a connection to the area and a connection to Mother Earth. And they always feel secure in where they're going. And that there's some of the things, And we try to keep the parents, it's hard to do in this modern day of age. We try to keep negativism from them. Because after a certain age, maybe the fourth, fifth month, during the pregnancy, the baby can hear things outside the womb. You picks up on language, can understand what the mama is saying, the father, different ones, relative. So we never try to help people, never use the words, no matter the circumstance. I don't know what I'm going to do with this baby. I can't afford to raise it. And different things, or I hope it's a boy, I hope it's not a girl, or whatever it might be, and many things like that. And so that often can affect that child as they grow up subconsciously. It's instilled in their memory, make them feel like they're really not wanted, or the world be better off, or somewhere along that paradigm, And some of the traditions I've witnessed, I seen some little boy get scolded one time. They never put the baby's clothes on the floor where they can be stepped over. There's something deep in the culture, that I don't understand all of that. It protects the spirit of the child and keeps them from being walked over in life. And that's some of the things that they do, And our families, as they grow up, even from birth up. I've known Native families, that maybe once a week, at least a certain time of each month, they gather their families into a circle, perhaps in the living room somewhere. Have a little sage, sweet grass, or something along that line. Smudge everybody down with it, And they will have a prayer. They'll have somebody take an eagle feather, a hawk feather, and they'll wipe each other. They'll wipe them down with that and take all the negative things out of their life and renew their spirit and actually pronounce a blessing on each other. And they do. It brings a very prayerful family, very close-knit family. And I've seen it where, my goodness, unbelievable to be taught to respect your siblings, each other, and taught in that culture, respect and protect each other, And some of the mothers I've seen where they would take their baby blanket and they would wrap them rather tight, not too tight, but tight where they feel snug, like coming out of the womb. They feel secure in that blanket. And it keeps them also from crying a lot, but it keeps them safe. And I've seen where some of the mothers in the older way, generations, they would take their food and they might chew it first and give it to the child. There's just many things of growing up in this way, So it's their culture teaches never scorn your children when they grow up. Never put them down. Never say you're stupid. Never say you won't ever amount to something. And because that can be instilled in their mind, they can carry that the rest of their life, no matter how successful they are. There's always something like that always seems to come forward from time to time. And they grow up with different stories. Sometimes the mama or the grandmother will sing a song to the baby to put it to sleep, or even a morning song. They'll build a little fire, put tobacco and offerings, and have a prayer for that child. And they tell stories, and not like Mary Had a Little Lamb, things like that, but stories that they can relate to, that will encourage them throughout life. I heard one time where it was a little chipmunks walking through the forest, and one kept getting away, and the mama couldn't control it, so the little chipmunk got away, and the big bear started chasing it. And the little chipmunk, just before it darted in the hole, the bear raked across his tail, and that has stripes on to this day across their back. There are things like that just to help the family stay together. Many legends, And so these are some of the things, that we, it's just to have positive input, their way of correcting children without, in an old-fashioned way, using a belt on them and this and that. That's why a lot of it, we try to encourage them, just like it was positive input, just like, we never say, okay, if you don't be good, this is an older generation, if you don't be good, I'm going to take you out on the hills and let the wild animals get you, or the boogeyman's going to get you, or something like that. And they grew up with the inner fear. They don't understand it. And some of the people would say, such as, if you don't behave, you'll never grow up to be a man. They'll never let you on a war party. You'll never be able to confront your enemies or protect your family. And many things are, are to be a scout or whatever it might be. They'll never allow the hunting parties. If you don't behave, one day you're going to grow up. They will never allow you in that hunt. And those are some of the things. So when they grow up, first being a warrior in the family, not like going out and fighting or killing. That's not the thing, but but when it come that time for battle, they were so excited to be part of it. They wanted to count coup on their enemy, like take a stick and touch it instead of taking them out, many things. And so they grew up in that culture to be brave in the face of enemies, no matter what it might be. And these are just a few of the things that there's things that, to be brave, is to stand up to be a tioshpe, your family. It includes your mom, your dad, your brothers, your sisters, all your relatives, making your relative ceremony with like extended families. They're all part of that. And they're made to respect their elders. They always respect their elders. And many traditions go along as a child is growing up, and I could go on and on for hours on these things, but however, we just share love with them and bless them and encourage them and let them be children on the meanwhile. Let me talk to us.
Thank you, Chief McCullough. I really, a couple of things I want to come back to just to make note of them now. One is waiting to name your child. I think that's really interesting, and the naming practice there to get a sense of what is the soul of the child before we name them. I think that's an interesting point that maybe we can come back to. I also really appreciate this bringing in the medical models that we often adopt. We anesthetize ourselves to the birthing process, and I really love the idea of taking afterbirth or the placenta and burying it and grounding it back into nature, because so much of our practices now remove us from all of that. And I think the soul wants that, right? The soul and the soil. So there's something, I think, getting back to these natural practices, back to this earthiness of naming and claiming. So let's hold on to that, and maybe we can come back to that in some of our conversation. Thank you, Chief McCullough, so much for being with us. And now, Shabnam, welcome. Shabnam is representing the Baha'i tradition and is also a teacher. So we may be asking you to come back some in the next couple of months, Shabnam, to share some of your wisdom. But if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself and sharing some about the Baha'i traditions of naming and claiming.
Sure. Again, my name is Shabnam Malkin. I was born and raised here in Louisville. Have traveled a lot and lived in other states and countries, and eventually came back to be closer to my parents. And when we started a family, just nice to have your parents around. So in the Baha'i faith, we actually do not have very many rituals, and not to kind of jump ahead to the end stage of life, but the only congregational prayer that exists is a prayer for the dead that is said, at when a person passes on to the next world at their funeral or memorial. And so because the Baha'i faith is so widespread all around the world, and one of the main teachings is unity in diversity, because we recognize that people are going to carry different cultural traditions with them from various parts of the world that they're free to incorporate. So there are not very many specific rituals of, what to do when the baby is born. So what I'm going to do is kind of approach it more from the angle of the life of the soul, and share a few quotes and prayers as well. So and this has kind of already been mentioned, and science is more and more, proving this as well. But in the Baha'i writings, we view the soul as being born at the moment of conception. And there's a quote that says, "The soul or spirit of the individual comes into being with the conception of his physical body." And so in the womb of the mother is really when the soul is already existing. And much like in the womb, the limbs are being developed, and the different organs to be prepared to live in this world. So the life of the soul in this world is, to develop spiritual qualities and to develop a relationship with God, and to learn our purpose in this world, which the Baha'is view as being mainly spiritual. That the physical body is a tool for the soul or the spirit. And so there are many prayers that have been revealed for children and children's development and education, and much guidance on that. And even starting from the time that the baby is in the mother of the womb. So there are prayers for expectant mothers that can be said before the baby is even born. Once the baby is born, again, there's not really specific rituals, but more so starting the process of the education of training of that child. There's a prayer that I would like to share for infants, and it says, "O thou peerless Lord, let this suckling babe be nursed from the breast of thy loving kindness. Guard it within the cradle of thy safety and protection, and grant that it be reared in the arms of thy tender affection." What stands out to me in this is a lot of times the relationship between the physical and the spiritual. And so though it says, let this suckling babe be nursed from the breast of thy loving kindness, we can, on the one hand, understand the physical aspect of, the baby being fed its mother's milk. And then also, on the other hand, the spiritual aspect of being nursed from the breast of God's loving kindness. And so, helping that tiny little infant to understand in its own way its spiritual development and nurturing that from the beginning. There's a quote from the Baha'i writings about the education and training of children, that we should attach importance to the training of the children, for whatever they learn in that early stage of their development will leave its traces upon their whole life, becomes part of their nature. And this, to me personally, was one of the reasons I was drawn to the field that I do work in with young children as a Montessori teacher, because we do know more and more that what happens in the early years really sets the tone for the rest of a person's life, and any habits or training or education that happens in these years becomes part of who that person is, even though they don't, none of us really remembers that much from the time we were, born until the age of 6, but it is probably the most important part of our development. And so for me personally, that was, one of the reasons why I, was drawn so much to the early childhood education and development. In terms of claiming, I was trying to think of, how to approach that topic of, a child, let's say, like being claimed as a Baha'i child. Of course, Baha'i parents try their best to train their child and help them learn the prayers and understand the Baha'i writings. And so much of the Baha'i faith is centered around the understanding that all religions are one, that there's only one God and, one religion that's been progressively revealed over time. And so Baha'i children are generally exposed to all the different religions and learning about their history and learning about their teachings, because you can't have one without all the others, and understanding, their connection to each other as well. And then at the age of 15, which Baha'is view as the age of maturity, then that child who now is a youth would make their own choice. So one of the main teachings of the Baha'i faith is independent investigation of truth. And I would like to read a quote on that. That says, "God has created in man the power of reason whereby man is enabled to investigate reality. God has not intended man to blindly imitate his fathers and ancestors. He has endowed him with mind or the faculty of reasoning, by the exercise of which he is to investigate and discover the truth. And that which he finds real and true, he must accept. He must not be an imitator or blind follower of any soul. He must not rely implicitly upon the opinion of any man without investigation. Nay, each soul must seek intelligently and independently arriving at a real conclusion and bound only by that reality. And so at the age of 15, one would ask that youth, do you consider yourself a Baha'i, and understand what that really means, and not just be, blindly following just because the parents, the parents or one parent is a Baha'i. And so that's a decision that person would need to make. In terms of a personal story for my own family, I think one of the ways that helps me to, as a parent of my son who will be 6 on Sunday, to remember that he is our son, but that ultimately he belongs to God, and he will have his own relationship with God. Of course, everybody comes to understand this at at a certain level, but for us, our son was adopted, and so we were there when he was born, and we didn't necessarily have that process of me carrying him in my womb and being able to say those prayers. But interestingly enough, I did still like pray for him even before he was born, and I do feel like the spiritual connection is just as strong. But just also remembering that ultimately he's not mine, but that he belongs to God. And I think that kind of reflects generally how any individual ultimately has their own relationship with God, and that what we can do, of course, is to provide them that love and the training and education in how to treat other people, and how they can use their talents and gifts to serve the world of humanity, and that recognizing that they will make their own choices and they will find their own path as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Shabnam. I'm so appreciative. A lot of people don't know about the Baha'i tradition. It's one of the fastest and the newest world religions. And one of the reasons why I think the Baha'i tradition is compelling to people in a modern, postmodern world is it does provide these beautiful guidance while also allowing them to bring in their cultural traditions. A lot of our world religions were grounded in a cultural time that a lot of times doesn't have that kind of same flexibility that the Baha'i community has. And I'm so appreciative of what I see coming out of that tradition. And so, yeah. And you also don't have religious leaders in the sense of they're not paid religious clergy. And I think that invites the whole community to take responsibility for the naming and claiming rather than just it being centered in one person.
Right.
Yeah. We can talk some more about that, but Shabnam, thanks for your wisdom and insights there.
Sure.
And next, we have Craig Pickett. Craig is with the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Craig, thank you for being on. And would you unmute yourself and join in our conversation, share a little bit about y'all's rituals and traditions?
Certainly. Thanks for inviting us to join with everybody here. We really appreciate listening to everyone's traditions and experiences. It's wonderful to get to do that. In our faith, we believe that all of us were created as spirit children of our Father in heaven, of heavenly parents, before we ever came here, that we had individuality and personalities, and that we existed prior to this earth life. And so coming here as a baby is a joining of that spirit with a body that was created here by earthly parents. And so the parents here understand already that these children aren't something they made. There's something that belongs actually to our Father in heaven. And so they come here with an idea that they need to be taught those things that are pertinent to their life that will take them back to their Father in heaven. we actually sing. We have a group of our younger children that meet on Sunday in a class called Primary, where they actually sing a song that was written that's called "I Am a Child of God." And that's how we see them, not only ours, but all children of the earth. They are all sons and daughters of our Father in heaven, each and every one, regardless of their tradition or their background or anything else. They belong to our Father in heaven. And so they're treated that way. And when they're babies, we also have a lay ministry. Members, the men in our congregation, if they're found worthy, can hold what's called the Melchizedek priesthood. And that gives them the authority to officiate these ceremonies or blessings that we would call them. And we bring that child before our congregation, and the baby is given a name and then a blessing. The name is the name that they'll be known on the records of the church and in this life. That can be chosen based on their culture, based on their family backgrounds, based on whatever the parents believe would be the best name for that child. And then we address our Father in heaven and present that child to him, give it its name, and then the priesthood holder, which most often is the father, is able to bless that child through the authority of the Melchizedek priesthood, and by being in tune with the Spirit for the needs of that particular child, whatever that happens to be. And I find that it personally a great and interesting thing, because the women have a tendency to become very spiritually connected to their children through birth or even through the adoption process. They have this ability within themselves to do that. But I will tell you from experience that being asked to call upon your Father in heaven and to hold this child in your arms is a wonderful thing that connects you as a father to your children. And to understand that it is your responsibility to teach them the things that they need to know about themselves as children of God, and what they need to do to return to him someday. We believe that these children come to us, these spirits come to us from our Father in heaven, pure as pure can be. Their bodies are not always perfect. We know that. This is an imperfect world that we live in, and sometimes they have issues that all of us do, that we all deal with in life, whatever that happens to be. And so you have an opportunity through being in touch with the Spirit to bless them, to help them to overcome issues that may face them in their lives, whatever that might be, whether they're spiritual issues, physical issues, emotional issues, whatever it happens to be. And we then, after we've given them that blessing, we close. We're great believers in Jesus Christ as the Savior of the world, and we close in his name, as we do all things. We find that our process is about inclusion of that child. All of us in our organization in the church belong to what's called a ward, which is a little geographic area full of members of the church. There are, here in Louisville, there are 4 wards of 2 branches. Branch is just a little smaller version of a ward. And that child belongs to the ward, just as everybody else does. There is when they're old enough, there's a nursery where they're involved, and they're taught stories about our Father in heaven and the Savior, and then they move into the primary organization that they grow up. And then we have later young men's and young women's organization when they turn 12 through the end of their teenage years that they're involved with. all along, learning community and learning that they are part of all of us. We are great believers that in the fact that when we come here, our Father in heaven has given us agency, the ability to choose, to learn, to grow. And so we don't baptize children until they're of what we consider to be the age of accountability, which is 8. And then they're actually, at that point, they're members of the church. And they continue to grow and learn and do what they believe. And we encourage them to do that, to gain what we call your own testimony of things that are good and true and right. And that it's not our job as parents to smash something into you, but it's our job to present you with this information, to bear testimony of things that we know are true and have found spiritually that are important to us, and then encourage you to find that through the same process that we went through, which is to study it out, to call upon our Father in heaven, and that through this, if you do that with real intent and do so in the name of Christ, that you will be able to learn what is true and what is right, and that you do it with real intent. That's the important part of that. That it's up to you. You're the one that needs to develop that kind of a testimony and things. So if I can just kind of come back, we are great believers in family. That's why we're so involved in the genealogy programs of the church and around the world, and the outreach to all of us as family, and that all of us belong. We belong to each other, and we belong to our Father in heaven.
Craig, thank you so much. And I, just as you were sharing about those moments of holding a child and asking God's blessing and your vulnerability with the meaning in that, shows the power of these rituals. And so, Craig, thank you for sharing not only your tradition, but sharing your heart around that. Sure. And those moments in all of our traditions where, you know, we're naming and claiming babies and life and what that means for these families, mothers and fathers, and that's just so beautiful. And you allowed the beauty of that to come through in your sharing. So, Craig, thank you. Thank you for your heart and for your mind in sharing that. Appreciate it.
Thanks for letting me participate. Yeah,
thank you. And Chandrika Srinivasan is with us. Chandrika is often a guest. She's with the Hindu temple here in Louisville. And Chandrika, thank you for being on. And if you would unmute and share some about the Hindu and Indian traditions of naming and claiming.
Thank you, Judd. And hi there. Good afternoon to everybody. Thanks for this opportunity to be part of this panel. I am very humbled and just intrigued and excited about the common thread that Judd had, you know, which was the goal that Judd was trying to achieve. And in some ways, I'm glad I went last because I get the benefit of actually starting that thread, as I've heard from everybody. For those of you who know, Hinduism can be as complex or as simple as you want to make it. And some would say the complexity comes from the highly and heavily ritualistic processes that we have in place that a soul or a being has to traverse through the lifetime. And the Sanskrit word that we use to describe that process is called sanskara. And much like other ancient languages, there are certain terminologies that are so difficult to translate into English to the point where, you know, how you can understand it and actually comprehend what that means. And I think part of that comes from the deep-rooted or the ancient nature of the languages and what they impart more than just the word. They impart more than just the surface reading of it. There is an emotional and a very spiritual component that goes with it. And Sanskrit is a fine example of one such language. Sanskara has been, authors have tried to define it in so many different ways. And the closest that people have, and what I'm getting ready to say is none of my work, it is what I've learned as I have prepared through the years and to prepare for today. The term that comes closest in the English language is sacrament. It is a process or a rite of purification that helps to sanctify the body, mind, and soul as we from birth until death. And Hinduism, we have 16 such samskaras, which basically is a ritual, the passage through life. The part that Judd has asked us to talk about, and I'm going to just stick to that, but it comprises 6 of the 16 steps, 6 or 7 of the 16 steps. And the naming, before even we get to the naming and claiming part, there's a part where from the moment of conception, that is the very first samskara. And that's where it starts. When you invite a soul into the body as part of that consummation process. And the Sanskrit word for that is garbhadana, meaning the giving of life or soul into the womb. It is a sanskara that is done for the very first pregnancy. And after that, if you have more children, they don't do the same thing. But that is a very auspicious occasion when a man and a woman come together after marriage. They will set a very specific date when the two of them will consummate. And you would think, wow, the whole world knows about it. Well, the world is responsible for the birth that, the soul that you are going to rear and raise. And so it's a very communal thing. And, when I say the world, I'm talking about the family. The elders of the family will confer and decide, okay, this is the period of time when you will engage in formal consummation, which is going to bring forth. And so obviously they are taking into consideration the menstrual cycle, the arrangement of the stars astrologically, because they take it very seriously. When you are going to bring a soul into this world, you better be sure that you've got all the stars aligned. And so that would mark the very first step. The next is once consummation has been effected on the 3rd month, there is another ritual called Pumsavana, which is also performed only for the first pregnancy. It is done in the 3rd month with the invocation of fire and purification of water. Those are the 2 elements of nature that are used in most of the sanskaras. And at this time, this is when we sometimes hear doctors talk about the quickening and, between the 10th and the 12th week. And this is when 2 young girls ritualistically will basically grind a shoot of the banyan tree, which is a tree of fertility. And they would add a few drops of milk, and that concoction is whiffed through the nostril of the mother who is pregnant in order to, with recitation of prayers and incantations. And this is when the first prayer for a worthy child is being said. And according to the science of Ayurveda, the banyan tree, the shoot is supposed to have some medicinal properties to prevent complications during pregnancy and to get this process of pregnancy started in a healthy way. After the ceremony, there is a certain time period that the mother fasts and then ends the fast by feeding a calf. Another, the cows being a very sacred animal in our religion, feeding the baby of a cow before she resumes her next meal. The next event that is done is, again, another ceremony that's done in between the 5th and 8th month. And it was interesting to me that Chief McCullough brought up that the concept of, the time when negativity is removed and everything positive is inculcated or practiced in and around the mother and who has a baby in the womb. This particular, this marks the development of the mind. And I'm obviously not going through the medicinal or the current scientific, but based simply on what the ritualistics state. This is when the husband engages in certain rituals where he parts the hair of the mother into two, on her forehead into two, and then prays for, calmness and peace that should come upon the mother. So the child's mental development is also surrounded with positive energy. And there are prayers that are then performed by the couple for a successful termination of the pregnancy where the baby is delivered in a healthy way. This is when prayers are also said to improve the intellect or to give birth to a child of strong intellect and good physical health. It is at this event that they would play musical instruments. They would start the chanting of prayers on a regular basis, because it's believed now that the baby can actually hear, can understand, comprehend voices, and they start the connection of the soul to the ones who the near and dear, and the ones who love, including the mother, father, and the immediate family. This is when they start talking about the positivity. They start singing songs to the child, telling them stories of heroes and of gods, so that there is in whatever sense that the baby is, when the baby is awake, you want the baby to be hearing things that are positive, strengthening the mental abilities, in utero, even before the baby is born. These days, however, the 3rd month event and the 5th and 7th, between the two events are combined for sake of time. But then you start thinking about why you do it, and then you realize that there is a purpose for why the events are timed the way they are timed. When it's time for the baby to be delivered, the mother is ritualistically taken into a room which has been cleaned and made ready for her, much like your nursery. But then that's where she will deliver the child. And that particular room is identified to be in the southwest corner of the house. And as she enters, there are elders and friends who are worshiping the gods and the family deities, and delivering the mother for the delivery, or preparing the mother for the delivery, includes proper diet that is approved. This is when anything that is going to impede a safe delivery, a smooth delivery, they will start cutting that out from the diet and make sure that whatever it is that she's having strengthens her pelvis, strengthens her muscles in such a way. And this starts at the very beginning. I remember when I was pregnant, there are certain cravings that kick in around the 3rd month, and that's when they're a little lenient. But after that, they will really watch your weight. They will watch what you eat. They will make sure that as you get closer to that time frame, they start giving you certain medications, Ayurvedic and homeopathic medications that are geared towards strengthening and actually arming you with the ability to deliver the baby smoothly without having to go into complications. During this ceremony, they also, interestingly, you will see women with bangles. They wear like bracelets which are made of glass. And I often question, why do they do that? And interestingly, they will make sure that you always lie down on the left side, and you don't lie down flat. Your mom or your aunt, somebody will start sleeping with you as opposed to your husband. And they will actually be the ones who will be guarding you and watching. Every time you want to go back on your back, they will tap at you and say, turn over. So you really had people watching and, preserving this and taking this very seriously, this responsibility of bringing a soul into this world. And at the same time, those glass bangles, as silly as it may seem, but it had a very practical use. A woman is probably more sensitive about not wanting to break her jewelry than something else that might overpower her. So those bangles sounded every time you moved, and that helped to remind you and kind of create a physical awareness about yourself, about which way you turned, what you did, how fast you were walking, what to control you in certain ways as far as your movement was concerned. Once the baby is delivered, then they will do a small ritual. Once again, this is to, they will invoke a fire and use some herbs and mustard seeds and grains. And apparently that is supposed to fumigate the room and try to keep the room sterile once the baby has been born. The other interesting thing that I learned was, as soon as the baby is born, nowadays they talk about cutting the umbilical cord right away and saving. And somebody had mentioned how I think it was Chief McCullough who had talked about, preserving and placing the umbilical cord back into the earth as a part of, grounding. Here, they will cut the umbilical cord. Right before that, they will say a prayer, and only as soon as the umbilical cord is cut, the mother is handed the baby so she can, nurse the baby right away, which is very similar to what happened in the hospitals these days. But the baby is not named until the 11th or 12th day after birth, for the same reasons that, for infant mortality was so high that, they wanted to make sure at least the immediate postpartum period, the child is healthy and is able to, they know that the baby is going to be okay. And if you think about it, it makes a lot of sense. Once we have given identity to somebody or something, we attach ourselves to it. And so, giving that period of time where we are still, without identity is not all that bad, because you are giving yourself time to heal, time to recognize, and giving the baby also time to, whether it's going to make it or not. So even the grieving process, in the unfortunate circumstance that it doesn't, you have not yet developed those kind of attachments that make it harder for us to let go. And finally, the naming ceremony is very interesting because it brings together the family. The maternal uncle is the one that carries the honor of receiving the child, and they usually make a bed of dehusked paddy. So the paddy is still the rice is still in its husk, and they will make a bed of it. And so it's not a soft bed by any means for a small child. And they will take the 11-month-old, strip it down, and then place the child on that bed of paddy. And while the child is wriggling before that, the maternal uncle will write the name of the child on the bed, and then place the child on the bed of paddy. The child is then received by the father, and the father would whisper the name of the child in the child's ear for the 3 times. And usually there are 3 different names, as Ms. Barillas mentioned. There is a name that we give for the family. There's a name that we give for the star. And then, of course, there's a name that you all want to call, something that's easy that everybody can call the baby by. And most of the time, the names that are given are of names of gods, whether it's a god or goddess, because it gives an opportunity. Think of the number of times we call our children. Why not name it in the name of God, so you can keep calling the child? And, those who know Hinduism know that we have 1 million gods. So there is a huge picking from which you can select the name of your child. And oftentimes it's your favorite deity, so that you can keep calling that child's name over and over again. And here you are basically uttering the name of God. After the naming ceremony, there is also, at the age of 6 months, the baby is given its first solid meal. Until then, the baby is nursing. And the baby's first meal is usually rice with milk and sugar. I will stop there because that's about, the naming and claiming part of it. And as far as the claiming aspect, just like Ms. Barillas mentioned, we identify a child by 3 generations before them. So in any ceremony, you would start with your great-grandparents, your grandparents, your parents, and then you. So that is kind of the way you create a lineage and create your identity, and for the particular individual to know their roots, where they came from, and where they are headed.
Chandrika, thank you so much. I really appreciate your ability to articulate and be a teacher of your tradition. That's you do that so well.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah, thank you. I'm interested in what we would call sometimes these pre-rational or pre-Western medical traditions, and how often we find that there was a scientific or a biological reason why these rituals got put in place, and yet it was kind of pre-rational. And then in modern medicine, we're finding that these rituals actually had biological and health related purposes, but they may not articulate it in a Western medical model. And so I think as we're seeing reemerge this different forms of blessing and ritual, that they're tapping back into pre-medical, pre-rational rituals that actually had medical benefit. I don't know if I'm articulating that well, but I just find the Hindu tradition, while it's got these rituals of burning different things that actually are proving that scientifically they do make a difference biologically, even though they may not have been presented in that way originally. So thank you all so much. There was so much here. What I'd like to do is open it up to, we have a variety of other folks that are on the Zoom call. If anybody's on a Zoom call and would like to share another ritual or a ceremony that maybe you experienced that we haven't mentioned, feel free to unmute yourself and just share a ritual that we haven't talked about around naming and claiming. Would anyone like to do that is joining us that's not necessarily on the panel? I was raised in a Baptist tradition and was ordained a Presbyterian minister before I kind of became an interfaith minister. And so I really appreciated the liturgy in the Presbyterian church around baby baptisms, baptizing the baby, and having godparents and inviting people to take responsibility intentionally for the care of that child, and having godparents as part of the ritual of the infant baptisms was really a powerful. And also in the Presbyterian tradition and many of the Protestant traditions that do childhood baptism, there is a claiming that the congregation makes, not only the parents are making, but the congregation makes to the baby and to the family, that I think is really beautiful in the Presbyterian liturgy. There is a really nice claiming liturgy or around what the congregation is vowing to do for the family. And I think those vows are really important, what godparents may be choosing to do as well. And naming that with language has been important in my tradition. So what I'd like to, yeah, please, anybody unmute and let's just have some conversation.
This is really short. I was just going to say, in the Jewish tradition, as you may know, the child gets not only a whatever language, of the country where they live, but they also always get a Hebrew name. And it's usually a biblical name. So it kind of, I guess it does sort of tether you to your religion in some way. So like my name's Robin, but my Hebrew name's Rivka, which is Rebecca. Rivka is the Hebrew for Rebecca. So yeah, so I just wanted to share that.
Yeah, thank you, Robin. I appreciate that. The naming and how different traditions do that is really fascinating to me. What they're trying to bring in, the stories that I try to bring in, whether they're generational stories from your family by naming you after someone, for like we named our son Hank Judson Hendricks. And so my first name is Judson. So, we're tying him in some way. And I appreciate the good and the bad of that, right? I mean, you're also, sometimes we tie people to other person's stories. And sometimes I wonder if that is always a good thing or not a good thing. But those naming and claiming rituals are powerful in our psyches, I think. What else are you all hearing? Let's have some more conversation. What else do you all want to share?
One of the things, if I may,
Please.
one of the things that I thought was very, very interesting to me from the Baha'i tradition is when Shabnam Makan mentioned, just hearing it in a language that everybody can understand, the principles of it could, just makes it even more, it's easy for people to either accept or reject. It's not the question of whether you want everybody to accept it. At least it opens you up for discussion and debate on whether you want to accept a particular way of looking at something, in the naming and claiming, or even as the individual develops. I love the idea of the independent investigation of truth. I thought that was very interesting. And there are, I was thinking back at the different phases, and I stopped at the naming and claiming part, but there is the next series is the educational samskaras of individuals, and that's where all of this comes in, the independent investigation, because you start going into a school, and then you study their ways, and then you debate and you understand. One of the ideas or purposes, I believe, of these traditions that we all have, in whichever faith it is to create a uniformity of some sort in the society, whatever it is that we are. But as this world grows and shrinks, depending on how you look at it, we have to kind of look at the rituals or the practices in a way that attaches some practicality to it, because we are reaching many people. We are amidst many people with different traditions and practices. And so I thought that was very interesting in the way she described the development of the spirituality, but making it reachable and understandable by everybody.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Chandrika. Yeah, I appreciated that as well. What are other comments or people that would like to bring in?
One of the things that I would like to share is that, first of all, my voice doesn't represent the whole Latin American or Latinx people in the city or in the world. It's just a whisper of my life. But I also want to honor that for us that come to different spaces, or that immigrate or come as refugees, sometimes by arriving to a new place, that gives us the opportunity to reinvent ourselves, to reclaim traditions that were forgotten or were forbidden or were not taught to us, but also the opportunity, to build a different way of looking at things. When you come from countries where there is this huge clash, religions, who is the true one, who's lying, who's not, it's very difficult to have the opportunity to go and explore. But I think that that's the gift that I love about my Louisville, and that's why I'm so proud to be part of the city, is the opportunity that I've had just to explore, just to belong. And you were saying something very important at the beginning, Judd, when you were saying how do we make sure that every child feels that they belong, that they are part of the city. And I think that by having these conversations, by all of us listening to each other, by all of us respecting our own truth and our own journey, I think that opens a different way of looking at things. Because I know for a fact, my 17 and 16-year-old children, they don't see the religion the way I used to see it when I was their age. They see it differently. It's more like religion itself. For us, is spirituality. We are still Catholic, and I attend a church where I believe in St. William's that there is this amazing way of not only praying, but also belonging to the community and being in community with you, Judd, and so many lovely people that I see in this conversation that I love and I admire so much. You know, it's really, really beautiful because, you know, it's that it's not a stamp of who we are right here. It's just that we are in community, and it is so beautiful to do that because that's what spirituality is about. It's about being in community, in being inclusive, and just loving and respecting each other.
Thank you, Karina. You articulate that so well. And I think that's part of this, the soul-centric city, is when people move outside of whether it be a cultural, ethnic tradition and practice or religious practice, we often lose the ritual and ceremony that go along with those traditions. And one of the things we know is that the soul loves ritual and ceremony. You know, the soul of a family or the soul of a person, and they provide us these guide rails, hopefully not, you know, boxes, but guide rails for our becoming, that outside of those, you know, and I'm not surprised in our culture, you know, one of the biggest medical issues right now is the issue of not belonging. People feeling alone, people feel like they don't belong to their communities, they don't belong to their families. And I think the mental health that comes, and often those people aren't grounded in cultural or religious communities. And I think that is something that Interfaith Paths to Peace and the Soul-Centric City is trying to address, is how do we reclaim these traditions in ways that make sense for us again? What rituals do we need to recreate out of a new consciousness that integrate, you know, the wisdom of our religious traditions and cultural traditions, but are new and are specific to us? I think that's and that's why hearing your rituals, I think, is so important. Craig, did you have something you wanted to share?
Well, this is more personal than it is faith-based.
Sure.
But you know, my family came out of Wales several generations ago, and being named William was a big deal for several generations until my grandfather, who hated that name, but was named William anyway. So he went by his middle name, and then when he named my father, he named him his middle name, and then as a middle name called him Junior, which he grew up with his whole life until the Second World War and the U.S. military got him, and then he had to go by his first name, and that's where he wound up. I've seen on the internet several times a little question of, why did your parents name you your name? And I'm sure that in some instances we know that, in other instances we don't really know why that's our name. Robin shared, you know, that her name meant Rebecca, which is great. I think that's great that people know what their name is. I started that with my son too. I named him 3 names, and I told him this when he was old enough to understand it, that he had a first name that was his, he had a second name that was mine, and he had a third name that was his family's, so that he understood where he came from. His first name is Ryan. And I named him that not as Ryan, but actually as a little shortened of Orion, to remind him that that's where he came from. But that also that he was part of me and his family. And that, I think, has hung on with him as he's now named, he's got an 18-year-old now that he named the same way, gave him a first name that was his, a second name that was his father's, and a third name that was his family, so that he understood where he was going. So I think in these traditions, some are cultural and some are religious traditions and naming. And sometimes I think we can start our own as an individual, as a family, as our piece of humanity here. This is what we're doing, so that you understand where you came from and who you belong to.
Thank you, Craig. Yeah. Go ahead, Chandrika, please.
So along those lines, I just wanted to share, you know, in our tradition, we don't have the middle name concept. And as as Craig mentioned, he gave him his first, his name as his middle name. I felt in our family, because, and you borrow things, you borrow the good, you let go of the bad. And one of the good things I borrowed in the naming aspect of it was we've named both our children, we've given them their name. And then we gave the middle name of the grandmothers because, the ladies never really got the recognition in the middle name process, naming process. So my husband and I said, the mothers need to be recognized in some fashion. And so we decided to use the middle name of both our mothers for our children. And then of course you have the family name. This way we felt like the identity, they will always remember the men of the family, but we wanted to give them the identity of remembering the mothers, the matrons. And so that's what we did.
Thank you, Chandrika. I think that's really important. I want to give Chief McCullough a chance to, we're out of time. These conversations just could go on forever for me, but I want to honor everybody's time. Chief McCullough, would you mind, what have you been hearing and feeling? Would you like to check out with a comment? You're still on mute there. There you go.
I loved everything that was spoken. It touches the heart, different cultures, different religions. It's very beautiful. And some of the rituals that we have, with the children, different ones. I remember a lady, friend of ours, she had a newborn baby. Before she come home, she brought it down to the Soul Creek Sundance. I have it blessed at the tree. So this is just different ways of blessing things, so I feel very good about everything, and life is beautiful, but these children are so important, the things that we're facing out there. So we need that family, regardless of what faith it is, that togetherness in some form or another, and just to help each other out. So.
Well, thank you, Chief McCullough. We are out of time. I want to thank the panelists that we've had: Karina, Steve McCullough, Chief Steve McCullough, Shabnam Makan, Craig Pickett, and Chandrika Srinivasan. You all are great jewels in our community. Thank you for your wisdom. Thank you for your practice. And for those of you that have joined us, I hope you'll come back and participate as we go through the whole year, looking at how to create a soul-centric city and society. Thank you all for being here and everyone sharing the wisdom. Again, this will be up on Facebook and up on the Interfaith Paths to Peace page. And a deep bow to all of you that have joined us today. Thank you very much. Have a great day.